Hi, I'm Marcia Mansfield, Director of Lift-Dane.
And hi, I'm Sarah Davis, the co-director of Lift-Dane.
I'm Nicole Braddock, the CEO of Theory and Principle.
We are so excited to be with you today to share our journey from dream to game changer, how we're using technology to transform civil legal aid. This is our contact information, and we're delighted to follow up with you after our presentation. I wanted to just briefly share what we're going to be doing in this next half an hour. We're going to share a high-level overview of Lift-Dane. We want to share the key components of the competition that led us to start this project because it's very informative, share about the program structure, very importantly for all of you, the technology development, and then give you an idea of where we are today and where we're headed. Lift-Dane was born to create a legal app to streamline access to justice. The app enables people to search public data and pre-populate forms to resolve legal issues that have economic and health consequences, and we'll be giving you a demo later on. And just to give you a sense, Lift-Dane is an initiative of several community nonprofit and academic organizations in Madison, Wisconsin, including our LSC-funded Legal Aid Society, law school clinics. We have a law school here at the University of Wisconsin, and our research partners. And Lift-Dane was born of a national competition put on by Schmidt Futures. And this competition was specifically designed to be between several public universities. And in Wisconsin, it was called Dream Up. So the goal of this competition was to jumpstart innovations to improve the economic condition of the fragile middle class. And the idea was for people involved in this competition to think of ways to do that through three channels: connections to jobs, keeping earnings, and addressing systemic barriers to employment. And the competition had key components that forced us to both be audacious and yet also make sure that we could create something that was implementable. So the things that it involved was you had to have a technology solution, so no surprise there. It needed to involve community and academic partnerships, and that was really key in terms of bringing the skills that we needed to have success with this project. It was outcome focused, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later in our presentation. It offered national mentorship, which has been incredibly valuable, and it required us to dream big and to plan the details. So I want to talk a little bit about this. Many of you are not surprised about the idea of having a scarcity mentality. Those of us who are working in civil legal aid are used to doing a lot with a little, right? So it took us a while to really be able to sort of dream big and think, what could we accomplish if we had enough resources? And then it had us zoom in and plan the details and really think about implementation. Okay, how are you going to make this possible? So it had both a phase of ideating and then making it real. Next slide. So dreaming big, this took us some time. We talked with national experts. We forced ourselves to really think, well, what if, what could we do? What would it be like to not just hire another half-time person to accomplish a small amount of the services that we need? Next slide. So once we got into the brass tacks of, okay, how are we going to make this happen? The competition required us to do things like create a logic model. And for those of you who may not be familiar with a logic model, this really forces you to think about what resources you're going to be putting into your project, what activities you're going to be doing, what outputs are going to happen. And often many of us stop there at the outputs, but then it really forced us to think of what are those long-term outcomes? What are we trying to get, not just in terms of service numbers, but what kind of changes do we want in behaviors and actions? And then lastly, what are the final outcomes that are going to happen? Next slide. So You're not expected to be able to read this slide, but this just sort of shows you the kind of detail that went into our logic model. Next slide. So theory of change, the other thing that the competition required us to do was to really think about what are the components of what we're trying to do and what are we trying to accomplish, right? What is actually going to make the change that we want to see? And so we really had to think very, very clearly about what kind of an initiative we were being. And so we came to the understanding, and we have to constantly remind ourselves that this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to be a technology initiative. We're not trying to be a legal service entity, where we are taking innovative technology with the help of theory and principle, and you'll be learning about this, adding that to trusted community-based social service networks and legal networks that already exist. We want to benefit from the assets that already exist in our community. And through that, we are creating this legal tune-up. And then we're not stopping there, right? The end result is not that output of a legal tune-up, but outcomes. And the outcomes that we want are to drive system change and to drive behavior change. We want people to start to think about their legal health the way they think about physical health or financial health, right? We want people to be thinking about preventative health. Next slide. The other thing that the next funding cycle that we had really had us think about was the system change that we wanted. And it introduced us to this framework that has also been adopted by NORC. And I have the site there at the bottom of the slide. So this has been really, really helpful for us to think about how are we making change on the three fundamental levels, structural, relational, and transformational, that are required for real system change if we're really wanting to tackle this civil legal aid crisis. And so I encourage you to look at this framework, and you can see very briefly that on the structural level, which we've already talked about, we're doing the technology, and we also have evaluation, which is really key to this initiative. And then on the relational level, this is a community-driven project that is making sure that end users are informing the design, and Nicole will be talking a little bit about that. And then really, as we talk about this idea of legal health and engaging in a legal tune-up and wanting to think about legal issues differently, we are trying to change narratives and habits. Next slide. Very quickly, the competition also required us to create a Gantt chart. Don't go running and screaming if this isn't something you've done before. Really, this is just a way to get you to think about how are we going to make this initiative happen. So what you do in a Gantt chart is you identify the stages and activities of your project and then when the things are going to happen. And importantly, you want to include milestones, right? How are you going to know that you're meeting your outputs, that you're on your way to those outcomes? Next slide. So again, you're not expected to be able to read this, but this just gives you an idea of what a Gantt chart for a big project like this can look like. So we started even at stage 0, which was like the things we needed to do while we were still in the competition. And you'll see went all the way through stage 4, which includes evaluation, improvements, and the sustainability, right? So next slide. I'm going to now turn it over to Marcia Mansfield.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah's given you a wonderful overview, both of the process and what our goals are. I'm going to give you a bit of an explanation of the more boring aspects of this, the nuts and bolts that we had to go through in order to get to where we are today. The first challenge for us arose out of the fact that we were a community law school partnership. There were various entities and agencies that came together to make this initiative work, but we didn't have a structure for it because we were all separate organizations. So when we got the money from Schmidt Futures, the first question was, where do we put it? Fortunately, both one of my colleagues, Mitch and I, were at the UW Law School, and we were clinical directors. And we were housed in an entity called the Economic Justice Institute. There also was a nonprofit, the Economic Justice Institute, Inc., which is a 501c3 apart from the law school and the university, whose mission is to support the clinics of the law school. Since our mission was within the scope of EJI Inc.'s activities, the full EJI board agreed to become our fiscal sponsor. And so we were able to open a separate checking account and a money market account under EJI Inc., but that housed the funding for Lift Dane. In addition, we drafted a sponsorship agreement with EJI Inc., as well as a joint venture agreement among the three entities involved in the project: Legal Action of Wisconsin, Employment and Training Associates, and the nonprofit EJI Inc. We deliberately left out the organization that Sarah is the director of, which is the Center for Patient Partnerships, as well as the EJI clinics, which we view as a valuable partner. The reason we did that was so that we weren't limited with the budgetary and structural requirements of a university and contracting with the UW entity. So we have one agreement with EJI Inc. and another agreement between the joint venture. We also created an advisory committee that had oversight, and I'll talk a little bit more about the advisory committee in a few minutes. After we had the funding in place, we needed to find a tech company to build the app for us. And although we had a lot of contact with experts around the country in developing our initiative, we needed to get much more specific in order to find a company that was going to fit well with our goals and objectives and needs. We did have a tech consultant at the time that helped us develop the RFP, because none of us on the team had ever done anything like this before. And we also had our mentors that we were so fortunate to get as a result of participating in the Schmidt Futures competition. And our mentors helped guide us in developing the RFP. We had a lot of fortunate aspects of our relationships fall into place, or that we could take advantage of, in order to put a team together to actually review the RFP, because we needed expertise. And I, although I was the director of Lift Dane, had absolutely no expertise in this area. So we were fortunate to have somebody from a large utility who had computer expertise, a computer consultant, and somebody who volunteered within the agency of a member of our advisory committee. So we all worked together, had a decision-making tree, we rated, we spent quite a bit of time finding the right company, interviewing, and then ultimately hiring Theory and Principle to develop the technology. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the granular components. The Lift Dane team is made up of the faces that you saw earlier on in the slides. It's Sarah Davis from the Center for Patient Partnerships, Mitch from the Economic Justice Institute at the law school, Sachin Gupta, who also works with Sarah, Stacia Conley from Legal Action of Wisconsin, and our representative from Employment and Training Associates, which is our employment resources. They are the basic people who were involved in the competition, and we started meeting on a weekly basis. We now meet on an alternate week basis to talk about all of the issues that the team has to face, from fundraising to developing technology to holding pop-up clinics. All of those nuts and bolts are talked about within the team. The advisory committee has the power granted by the EJI board to enter into contracts or to authorize someone to enter in on behalf of Lift Dane, as well as to provide oversight and counsel. We were very strategic in hiring members of the team. in order to make sure that we had people with technological expertise, with marketing expertise, with philanthropic expertise. And we meet with them on a monthly basis to talk about ideas and to draw on their thoughts and contributions as we continue to grow. We've had a lot of exposure with people nationally. I participated in almost every seminar that SRLN puts on since early spring and have been able to meet wonderful people and take advantage of their expertise as a result. And in addition to that, we needed to build our exposure while we were still working with Theory and Principle on developing the app. So we developed a website. We have a Facebook page. We do social media. I regularly blog on the website. I've written op-eds for the newspaper. We've attended other conferences and presented at conferences. And we've also engaged in fundraising and reached out and told people both locally and nationally what we were doing, because the money we got from Schmidt Futures, which was substantial, was still insufficient to fully build this out as we envision to become a statewide project and hopefully a nationwide project. So we did a lot of outreach early on. We went to our local Chamber of Commerce. We went to our local business organizations. We talked to potential funders, and we spent a lot of time talking with individuals who are affiliated with local organizations, both in terms of getting them set up to understand what it is that Lyft will offer to the community, and also to work with them on policy initiatives that directly impact the people that we're trying to serve. So the last slide I'm going to share with you is just an example of our flyer, and that we've used to reach out to businesses, to individuals, to social service agencies, and we have various types of flyers that we use with different kinds of populations. We also worked very hard this spring on a business plan that helped us kind of coordinate and organize our vision, and then move forward with sharing it with potential funders. And we are continuing to revise as new modules are being developed for the app, and we're moving forward with reaching out in our community. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to give you an idea of how the design process and an application was actually developed.
Muted. Okay. So we are very excited to show you guys what we've been working on. This project, I cannot stress enough how we feel this is really moving the needle in access justice technology. And you know, the team that Lyft Dane assembled and the idea that they had before we even stepped in, we got very excited about from the second we heard about it, because it was clear that they were thinking really big and really thinking about how we can move this technology forward and think about new ways to help people uncover issues they may not even know about and help them resolve them. So I'm excited to share with you a lot of what we've done here. So I'm gonna sort of give you a high-level overview of some process stuff and how we sort of work through design, and then also show you a little demo of the product, which is now live and in production. So we generally follow a certain path when we're building, which is, you know, we have a discovery phase and then we move into design and development. And so we started this in January in the discovery phase. And at that time, we were fairly certain that we were going to be working on an issue of suspended driver's licenses, given the critical impact that that has on people's ability to, to get more gainful employment, to generally like making life difficult if you've got a suspended driver's license. And that was a fairly complex area. There's a lot of agencies involved. There's a lot of process that we had to unravel. So we worked pretty hard on, learning all we can about this, deciding what matters most, and then started to ideate on some solutions. But we never got to the build, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit about that. So one of the awesome things about working with Liftane is that they also run these clinics, and that gives us an incredible opportunity and insight into the type of users who need our product. So in January, they happened to be hosting a clinic for driver's license suspensions. So we sent a team, 3 members of the Ethereum principal team, to Wisconsin. We got to observe lawyer-client discussions, obviously with the consent of the client, to really hear directly from the client about how this is affecting their lives, what the issues are, where the pain points are, where their confusions lie, and really try to understand the problem. We also interviewed users while we were there, and we looked for patterns and challenges, behaviors, common needs. We also, during this early discovery period, did a bunch of research, secondary research, with a number of subject matter experts. And this included pro bono lawyers who were at that clinic, Liftane stakeholders, directors of related legal aids. And this really helped us continue to flesh out who we're building this for. We did a lot of work in getting to the point where we understood sort of the types of users, and there's a lot I'm not showing you here, but this is sort of the rough map of, you know, who are the types of users, what are their needs, and we kind of map them on an axis between how simple versus how complex their legal needs are, and how low versus how high their client needs are. So, you know, how easily are they able to understand, you know, core processes? What is their reading level? How comfortable or nervous do they feel about going through these things? And then that led us to sort of identify, okay, well, you know, obviously the lowest hanging fruit here is the simple legal case and the low needs client. So let's start there as sort of an MVP. Let's start with that, and sort of, you know, the core is let's pull some data about this person. We'll help explain what that means, help them explain the process, and then work through that to resolve it with them. And as we move forward, we can start to address the more complex legal cases as we iterate on the product and include sort of more nuance and complexity. And then also help higher needs clients as the product iterates. So, for example, the ability to offer direct support of attorneys is sort of in the pipeline for the future. So we started with driver's licenses. We took all of the information that we learned from the clinic and from our other research and started to compile some concepts, some wireframe mock-ups of the mobile version of the application. This application is mobile first, understanding that most of the users will be using this on a mobile device. So we started out with a variety of options, and there's about 1,000 more pages of mock-ups that I'm not going to show you, but we'll start there. Working with the team, we sort of narrowed it down to a certain version. And then we took that version and sort of expanded it out into the sort of core screens. And again, here we're contemplating driver's license as our first. I should note that all this time we're also working with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation on the data needs. I'll talk a little bit more in a bit about the challenges that we face with gathering the data, as I'm sure a lot of the tech nerds watching this will be wondering. So we're all geared up to go back to Wisconsin for another round and another clinic in March. We bought our plane tickets and everything, and then that was right when we just put a pause on life. So we had to do a little pivot to remote testing. We leveraged an application called Userlytics, which allows us to create sort of walkthroughs of the prototype, ask pointed questions of users, and then Userlytics goes out and recruits the user types based on our requirements. And then also, the user then can log in, walk through the application, record their responses to our questions, and then we get that whole video and transcript. So it was a pretty big pivot, and we still feel like we got some very good data out of it. We certainly had to tweak a little bit the requirements for user recruitment, and mostly to get to a population that's more representative of the people that we're going to be serving. We ended up getting a lot of college kids and so we sort of adjusted those levers to make sure we were including more a sort of broader set of test participants. So once we tested those prototypes and we made some tweaks, we then move into mood and style. So here we send a survey out to the Liftane team. They come back, and then we put together some various styles. Mood A was the one that was chosen. And then, as you can see, we then apply those styles to the wireframe design. So this is the desktop design. At that time, we were trying to figure out what is the best landing page, because having people click that start free tool is all our focus. We want them to feel trust. We want them to press that button so they use it. So we did another round of testing in Userlytics on comparing these two landing pages. This is just an example of some of the data we get back of how comfortable would you be giving the site your information. This sort of gives you a sense of the type of data. And then we go and design. And so we went through and designed the entire mobile application, all the screens. Not everything, but we designed enough to get started development. We began development. As we move on, we design all the ancillary pages around it. For example, this is a privacy policy page that we designed to be really user-friendly and understandable. We had to design things like all of the hover states and all of the colors and all of the fonts and every tiny little thing in the application. And then we're also designing right now for future iterations of future parts of the product. So this is an example of a child support flow that we've not started to build yet, but sort of thinking ahead. From an accessibility standpoint, this is mobile first to sort of meet our users where they are. It's obviously contrast compliant. You can navigate the entire thing with a keyboard. It's usable with screen readers on both mobile and desktop, across browser, across device. We also have Spanish translation through here. We use the wonderful people at Transcend Translations to do a hand translation of the entire application. Data access is a piece that I think people are probably wondering about. So you're not intended to be able to read the things in the top right, but I wanted to include them so you can see the number of steps that we've been through. I asked the product manager on the team to go through this exercise, which she had fun with. So at first we thought that we'd have the data from the DOT, which is why we were pushing hard on the driver's license driver's license suspensions. But then COVID hit and their priorities completely changed. And so they were not able to help. So right in the middle of COVID, we said, okay, well, we have all these other ideas of other things we want to help with. Where do we go next? So then we went to Child and Family Services. You saw the child support modification piece of this. We've had a number of conversations with them over the months. Looks like we can't get anything from them until next summer. So then we said, okay, DOJ, the state DOJ. We contacted them. We actually have made success, and we now have access, and we're working on a scraper to pull data from the DOJ to help with criminal record removals at the state DOJ level. But we also had great success because CCAP, which is the circuit court system unified system in Wisconsin, has an API. You have to pay for it, a lot of money, but they have an API. It's actually fairly well documented. And so we were able to pull data from that, and we're able to make the first functions of the site available. So this is sort of a pretty quick overview of the process that we've taken. The sprints probably aren't quite right, but we went through discovery, we went through some of design, and now we're going through, we've had release 1, we've actually had release 2, and as we go, we just continue to do these releases along the way. Marsha and Sarah have been absolutely critical along the way. This is our sprint schedule typically for them. They participate in backlog grooming every other week. We do a demo for them every other week. We do planning for the next sprint. We give them content deadlines, which they write all the content. So it truly is a partnership. And one of the ways we work together is we have a microsite for this project that sort of gives them easy access to the documents they need, to the team information, and all of that good stuff. Okay, I'm running short, so I'm doing a live demo. We're going to do it quickly because this is the best part of this whole thing, right? We are on the development site here because I'm using a fake name, so just everything should work great, but development sites. So, here's the landing page. You can see that it's fully translated into Spanish. We have this little preview here of what other things are available and what things are coming soon. as far as functionality. We have some quotes and some news articles and a little bit of information. We do have this ever-present privacy policy here because we want to make sure people can trust this site and they feel comfortable giving us their information, because for some of these workflows, we will ask for sensitive information. You can click it and make it go away. All right, so all we need to get started is some basic information. So I'm using our lovely fake guy, John Doe, who is born on January 1st, 2000. Click a button. And that's all that John has had to input for us to go out and pull data from CCAP. So the things that we're looking for right now are there any criminal records sitting on this public database that, that is easily searchable by potential employers, by potential landlords, pulling that and looking at it and comparing it against some logic to determine, are those eligible for removal? We also have a workflow that I'm not going to show here, but you're able to go look at it at legaltuneup.org. Sorry, legaltuneup.org. But this is helps you get connected with training, employment, and training assistance. We launched this last week. The very next day, they already had inquiries, and so that's very, very exciting to see how quickly we're getting some response there. Again, there's some things that are coming soon. So if the system, if we have pulled the data and found that there are eligible records, it will identify it here. Give them a little preview of what's going to happen. And then we want to make sure that this is the person that we're talking about, right? Because there are certainly cases where they have the wrong name or a different person. And I think one of our future workflows will be to resolve those issues should that exist. So John's going to say, okay, yep, that was my assault. That was my breaking and entering. So here you see John has 3 that are eligible for removal, 1 that can be removed, but there's a 2-year waiting period. So John has to wait for removal 11 months and they can come back. We're also building an account feature so that we can remind John later that he needs to come back and resolve that. So now we're gonna help them fill out the form. I'm not gonna go through this whole process, but I'm just going to give you a little quick preview. So we take some basic information from John. We fill out the form that's required for the court, and actually this whole process has convinced the court of the value of revamping that, which is really neat to see too. And then we can either have John can download the form, mail it himself, take it to the court himself. We provide him the instructions to do that, or he can actually just click a button and we mail it off for him. So so it is truly end-to-end resolution of this issue that can cause major impact into John's life. So I think that that's extremely powerful, and we can't wait to continue to roll out new features that have this level of impact with this level of ease. There really isn't much that has this level of ease associated with it. All right, so my gushing is over. I think this is Marcia or Sarah.
I think it's Sarah's putting in, but basically this is a preview of who the user is, what the intended outcome is, and what people want done. And that has been the focus of the app. So what we plan to do is to continue to adapt the app and to pivot as needed, as we've been pivoting a lot in the last 9 months. We are also going to be engaging in the strategic planning process, because as we think about scaling this statewide, we really need to determine what is the best organization for us and how we are going to face the challenges that will arise as we develop and implement statewide. We also will be starting to do the evaluation, both an implementation evaluation and an outcomes evaluation, as well as building the team and fundraising for future expansion.
So we just want to circle back to, we are learning through the major funders that we have received funding from, how important it is to tell the outcome story, to focus on the value for the clients of resolving these legal issues. From Schmidt Futures, they really cared about economic stability. And then for our next funder, we were able to very easily also tell the story about the relationship between resolving legal barriers and health outcomes. And we'll be able to consider, continue to think about what are the multitude of outcomes that addressing civil legal issues can have. Next slide. We are excited about the future. We are excited to have a conversation with you about what you're doing and to share some more details. We're continuing to build out the app as we receive this public data. We're excited to spread and test to a second county once we have enough product and COVID is resolved so that we can do this as fully envisioned, to work on that outcomes evaluation. And not surprisingly, we will continue to fundraise, fundraise, fundraise. Next slide. So thank you so much for listening to us, and please provide feedback on this session.